2 days of Swiss are in the books at the World Championship. And how do you make sense of this? We have 4 2-0 teams: AL, CFO, KT, and TES. So that's the number 1 seed from the LCP and CFO, the number 2 and 3 seeds from the LPL, and the number 3 seed from the LCK, meaning the top teams from the LPL, the LCS, the LEC, and the LCK, none of them have gone undefeated in the first 2 days. How did we get here? And where are we going next? Also, welcome back to JLXP. I'm going to be breaking down all 8 games from day 2 of Swiss, talking about some of the larger meta implications, and then looking forward a little bit with the draw for the rest of the Swiss stage here at the World Championship. I'm going to be trying to do these every day after the matches throughout the World Championship. So thank you for being here. If you enjoyed yesterday's episode, please subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. But first off, I do want to talk a little bit about the meta at the World Championship so far, because I feel like it's starting to settle in a little bit here on day 2. I thought Yunara made a huge impact on the games today. When I was looking at the pick bans throughout day 1 to day 2, the first game of the tournament, we saw Yunara picked in the 4-5, but since that game, it's either been banned, first picked on blue side, or picked in the first 2 on red side. And when I see it in game, I feel like it just has massive impact. I think another champion that had a really big influence over the results today and was a big part of the LPL going 3-0 and the LCK going 2-2 was Qiyana. I think it's going to be a huge pick for the LPL and a currently large problem for the LCK. And I think part of this is what happened in the team's regional playoffs, where Qiyana wasn't the most picked jungler in the LPL playoffs, but when it was picked, it was 7-0. And when it was picked in the LCK playoffs, it went 0-5. So both China and Korea had vastly different data on how strong they thought the pick was. And I think that probably influenced how much practice time they were willing to put into it going into Worlds. So I feel like the LPL teams are, at this point, masters of Qiyana. And I feel like LCK didn't think it was good, haven't put the hours in, and it's going to be hard for them to pick it up, which I think is really interesting to track, as some of these teams are going to have off days and more days to scrim to potentially add it into their pools. I think Rek'Sai in the top lane is really interesting. I didn't expect to see it so much. It still seems pretty effective in team fights, but my God, it might just be because the champion is kind of slow and goofy with the tunnels. It kind of feels like some of these players are first timing it. Doran's Rek'Sai game was one of the most absurd things I've seen. He had some really nice outplays, as we'll get into when I talk about that game, but then there were also moments where he was missing flash Q knockups, where he's getting solo killed by Draven. Just a really weird champion. I think Kai'Sa is also something that is strong but not fitting in the meta right now. And I also think Bard is just OP. So I wanted to run down just the top 5 picks in each role, because I think it gives a good picture of what the meta is going to be throughout the rest of Swiss, even into best of 3, because I feel like best of 3 Fearless is a little bit fake, where yes, you can deny 2 picks from the top lane in the first game, but then you're still going to be rounding out the rest of the top lane pool. So weirdly enough, I'm going to use the prio score from Games of Legends, and the way this is calculated is a ban or a first round pick counts as 100, but a round 2 or round 3 pick counts as 50 and 33. So it's just a way of, instead of like overall presence, since it's a Fearless graphic, isn't going to be exactly like 100% presence. Anyway, the top 5 based on the prio score is of top lane: Ambessa, Sion, Rumble, Cassante, and then Rek'Sai. Cassante's 7 picks, 0 bans, so definitely something teams aren't fearing but are always willing to lock in. Interestingly enough, it's 2-5. The most wins in this bunch is Sion at 4-2. I feel like a lot of these games are scaling and becoming front-to-back team fights, so Sion, very effective. Also, no, one of those losses was the G2 game where they opted into lane swaps, played it into Trundle, never had a chance. So in like the close games, it's 4-1. So I think Sion's been one of the dominant picks of the top lane. When I look at the jungle, the highest prio score is Wukong. I expect that to stay. Wukong, Vi, Jarvan, Xin, Qiyana, Trundle. Those are really the big 6 of the jungle. More so big 5 though, because Trundle's only 2 picks, 0 bans. The Qiyana is going to continue to rise throughout this tournament, especially with what CFO and the LPL did with it today. So I think everyone's going to be wanting to play Qiyana. I look at the mid lane. Most picked is Orianna. 100% prio score. Sorry, not most picked. Most prio scored is Orianna. 5 picks, 11 bans, 4 wins, 1 loss. After Orianna, it goes Rise, Azir, who's been banned 12 times. So it seems like Azir's fallen off, but he's actually just getting basically permabanned. And then Talia, Aurora, Galio, Cassio after the top 5. I think this has a little bit of room to shift, honestly. I think Azir will start falling through a few more ban phases. I think Orianna is going to be a big pick throughout the entire tournament, but especially in Swiss stage, as I mentioned yesterday. Early on at Worlds, scaling is king. So many mid laners are masters of Orianna with thousands of games on the pick. So the best mid laners are comfortable picking Orianna, especially when they feel like they're up against inferior opposition, and they're just going to smash with the pick. Like BDD is now 2-0 on Orianna. He's won 2 scaling games, but overall the pick is 4-1, and I think the standout mid of the tournament so far for me. Bot lane, as I mentioned before, Yunara, strongest AD carry on the patch. 7 picks, 9 bans, 100% prio score, 5 wins, 2 losses. After that, it goes Caitlyn, Kai'Sa, Xayah, Corki. But really high concentration of Yunara, Caitlyn, Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa's 1 win, 5 losses. But I feel like that's because it's not a good lane matchup into Kai'Sa, and it's a pretty bad matchup into Yunara is what I'm finding, because when Kai'Sa tries to all-in the Yunara, a lot of times she's not able to because Yunara has so much close-range damage. And if you're stuck in a long lane, Yunara versus Kai'Sa, sometimes Yunara can just run you down. So I think if Yunara switches to permaban, I think Kai'Sa is going to find a little bit more success, but currently it's 1-5, and teams might scare themselves off of Kai'Sa. And then when I look at the support pool, Nico is the 100% prio score, 5 picks, 11 bans. Then it goes Alistar. Poppy has 10 bans. Hard to say if this is top lane, jungle, or support bans, but it's definitely the LPL teams I find are probably the ones that are priority Poppy the most. Kyle had an amazing Poppy support game. We've also seen 2 Poppy bans from LPL teams against 100 Thieves, which is just wild since they don't play Poppy at all, but it just means that I think they think this pick is strong and they don't want to play against it. Bard, weirdly enough, is only 4 picks, 2 bans, but when we see it, it just looks so OP to me. So I think it's one of those things where if you have a Bard player and you see the Bard angle, you're going to lock it in, but I don't know if it's going to be able to rise to the level of Nico or Alistar in terms of pick bans. So that's an overview of the meta, and now I'm going to go a little bit game by game before, at the end of the episode, zooming out, talking a little bit about the Swiss draw overall and some of the regional trends that we've seen throughout the World Championship. So first up was the very friendly draw, I would say, for North America, where FlyQuest gets to play their 8th game of the year against VKS, and basically 8th game within the last 2 months, because they 3-0'd them in the upper bracket of the LTA playoffs. They 3-1 them in the finals of the LTA championship, and they now played against them here. And this game looked very much to me like a standard FlyQuest game that they would play back home. They, as I have draft on screen right here, Orianna was first picked. I think that was smart by Miru, but then FlyQuest just picked fairly generically strong scaling picks, aside from the Mordekaiser, which is just what Bwipo's going to do. He's going to 5-pick some counter pick that he feels like works great into the composition. But for those of you on podcast, we had VKS with Sion, Jarvan, Orianna, Kai'Sa, Nautilus, and we had FlyQuest with Mordekaiser, Wukong, Victor, Yunara, Alistar. I think there was nothing crazy that went on in this draft. I will say, even though it's Bwipo's second Mordekaiser game, I loved the Mordekaiser angle, not necessarily because it's like a lane counter to Sion. He can be fine in that lane, but it's going to be really good into Nautilus and eventually Kai'Sa. So there was a moment in this game where it was like a Rift Herald fight. Mordekaiser can just eat the Nautilus, basically take the engage away from that team. He will almost always kill the Nautilus since it's support, and then he pops out and you're in a 5v4 for free. So something to watch for. This is what Impact would say when I was on Team Liquid and he was picking Mordekaiser a lot in 2020. Whenever the team had Nautilus, it was like an instant we could just pick Mordekaiser. He'd eat the Nautilus in team fights and we'd win. So I think that's kind of what happened this game. As I mentioned, the early game in this one was much more FlyQuest style, low variance. No one did too much in lane. They played completely on Inspired's timer, so he got to take all the fights that he wants. They had a good support jungle roam mid lane when Quad was level 6, got them first blood. Masu and Busio were absorbing multiple Jarvan ganks, not dying, escaping with low health. That just gave them a good advantage. And then the first big fight in River, Mordekaiser 8 Nautilus, killed him first, popped out, and ended the fight with a triple kill. So that led to FlyQuest being ahead in tempo. Even before that Herald fight, Quad was taking bot turret already. And the rest of this game was FlyQuest holding their leads, holding vision, and taking fights exactly on their timer. 2150, I did a game checkpoint. They were up 9 kills to 3, 40,000 gold to 36,500 gold. There were 2 core items on everyone from both sides, so I thought maybe Vivocade Stars would take a fight. But FlyQuest just had so much pressure in lane. They had so much vision, and Vivocade Stars probably felt like they couldn't make many moves. FlyQuest just ended up getting Otacon for free, and they just steamrolled the game from there, right? Like, Inspired got a large CS advantage on his Wukong, was pretty untouchable in teamfights. He ended the game 10-2-12. Quad was 9-0-9 on the Victor. And Busio, honorable mention, 22 of 26 on kill participation with his Alistair, 1-0-21. I think a nice bounce back game after we had a rough Nico game against T1 yesterday. And FlyQuest is fine. They're honestly doing the same thing they did last year at Worlds, where they are getting some favorable draws. They ended up drawing another good matchup, as I'll get into the matchups at the end of today. I'm actually just going to scroll to it right now. FlyQuest got TSW for tomorrow after playing VKS today. So I'm expecting them to win. Not tomorrow's matchup, because tomorrow is going to be the 2-0 teams facing off against each other, but in 2 days, they're going to be able to play their 1-1 matchup and hopefully move to 2-1. So FlyQuest, hopefully back on track after the game they had yesterday, but this was an expected result from FlyQuest. They look completely normal after they looked a little bit off against T1 yesterday. Next game, one of our 2-0 teams, KT Rolster. And really quick, just going to run down the team comps. KT goes big scaling energy. Ornn, Trundle, Orianna, Caitlyn, Nico versus Team Secret Whales, Rumble, J4, Galio, Ezreal, Bard. And I definitely agree with some of the people that are saying KT has looked a little bit shaky, which they have, in the sense that their games haven't been one-sided stomps, but they're just picking for so much scaling. And BDD is just in control of these games on Orianna. Yesterday's game was a lot closer against MKOI. Today's game was a little bit more stompy. The early game was still looking shaky, but the scaling is what I think they've been prioritizing in these drafts. And ultimately, like, you draft to win the game. You don't draft to get a 9.5 on your Hoopu rating or to impress analysts as much as possible. No, you want to be 2-0. So now they'll need to effectively lose 3 best-of-3s in a row to not make it through to the quarterfinals with the draw that they got. So I think they'd be generally happy with how this went. The specifics of the draft, I think KT early on with the Nico Caitlyn lock early, they're just trying to spam lane priority. They basically pick that blind after the Orianna, and then they just secure their scaling later on in the draft. I feel like TSW tried to play a pretty standard dive comp here with the Jarvan, Galio, Rumble, not to mention the Bard to roam around the map to maybe dissuade some of the lane pressure that would be able to be created by the Nico Caitlyn. So I don't think there were any major issues in the draft here. In fact, I'd probably favor TSW's draft a little bit, just since KT's is so passive with the Orianna and the Ornn, with Nico Caitlyn being the real ones that are getting lane prio. I potentially would have liked something different than Galio, but I just don't think that they thought they'd be able to beat BDD's Orianna and get prio in 2 out of 3 lanes anyway, so they went for a team fight pick in the Galio. Early game of this one, the Nico Caitlyn just pushed a lot early, got plates. His Toes J4 was really aggressive. He got a good pick in Cuz's blue buff area. They played off of Galio's level 6, slammed in on Cuz's Trundle, got a kill. But it really, as I was watching this early game, like, KT did not care at all about fighting. They were just getting as many plates as possible. and playing a little bit sloppy. Peter's Nico got way over aggressive in top lane. He basically entered a kill away trying to finish off Rumble, like basically through the tier 2 turret when they should have just been focusing on more plates. In moving forward in the game towards the Rift Herald fight, BDD nearly solo killed Rumble in the top 1v1. Cuz didn't get one shot by the Trundle this time, pressed his R onto J4 and got him through the fight. And I feel like that was kind of going to be the story of the game, even though the game stayed close for a little bit. I can go all the way to like 20 minutes. The fight was really messy, and this is where I thought like, wow, KT, this is them looking bad, because they took a really strange fight in the mid lane where TSW was able to kind of scrap around with Bard, Jarvan, Rumble, Galio, Ezreal in these spread out fights and be pretty effective. But once KT felt appropriately scaled, they really just turned online. And I think the biggest thing in this game was the third dragon fight when their scaling was online. You see the fight, you see the composition working pretty perfectly. So as you can see the composition here, the way this fight worked, Jarvan ulted in, and then he just instantly died because they trundle ult him. Everyone just backed away rather than trying to engage. And then once Jarvan was deleted, then they fly forward with pillars, with the Ornn ultimate, and run down the rest of TSW. I also just don't think TSW is at the same level as CFO or any of the LCK or LPL teams, because there was a window before that third Drake fight around Otacon where I think they potentially could have gotten a nice pick. There was a nice setup where Cuz had a pillar interrupt on a Jarvan EQ, and it allowed KT to like not fall too far behind in gold. But like overall, the first two games of the day were a little bit sleeper. KT wins this one in 28 minutes. I wouldn't read too much into the KDAs. It was 14 kills to 11, but I think it was a relatively stress-free win for KT, even if KT fans would say differently, because they have a lot more KT scar tissue than I do. But I still feel like they're fine and have a decent chance of going through at 3-0. Okay. Game 3. More LEC tomfoolery. Lucky, unlucky that they drew each other here. This is LEC's only win at the World Championship, was when they played each other. So the rundown of these team compositions: MKOI, Jax, Wukong, Taliyah, Caitlyn, Alistar versus Fnatic, Cassante, Xin, LeBlanc, Yunara, and Bard. I thought the LeBlanc pick was really bold by G2. I feel like going into JoJo, who is an extremely competent laner, in a pick that I thought would need to get going early, was pretty risky. JoJo played the lane fine. They actually got a couple kills on caps early. The rest of the team comp, with G2 picking Bard on 5, means they're just going to completely roam around the map, which makes it even more important that either the LeBlanc or the Cassante get ahead, and they want to play sides as much as possible. And Yunara is part of that. This is one of the reasons the pick is so strong, because it can do strong AoE in teamfights if you're doing a front to back. But if you're picking a team comp like this for G2, where you're just trying to play side lanes, Yunara pops ultimate and can run people down whenever they have a small numbers advantage. So the more I look at this draft, the more I actually like it from G2. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how the game actually went. A pretty important moment happened early on in the top lane when Mirwin tried to solo kill Broken Blade's Cassante, and Broken Blade had like the perfect flash timing. So it's Jax versus Cassante, right? And he goes for the turret dive. He gets a really good chunk on him beforehand, starts charging up his E, and leap strikes in with his counter-strike on, trying to get the stun and what effectively would be the kill. And Broken Blade flashes at a point where the leap strike damage still goes through, but the stun doesn't hit. And that gets turret aggro onto Mirwin's Jax, in which case Hans Sama's Yunara is just walking up the lane because they're already timing a swap. He ends up picking up a free kill. So not only does Hans Sama get fed, Mirwin falls behind, and it starts off in a good way for Broken Blade's Cassante, because now Jax is going to lose a bunch of experience as well because of the death. So pretty huge. Also, Hans Sama played a bot river fight just extremely well. I feel like the Bard, Xin, Yunara trio was really keeping them in the game early, since Caps' LeBlanc was getting shut down by the Taliyah Wukong. I'd say Elyoya Jojo were putting in a lot of work to keep Caps down. All of the ganks from Elyoya's Wukong early were moved towards Caps, so Caps did not get that far ahead in the game. But because of all the skirmishing, and because even from a slight deficit, LeBlanc was able to threaten Taliyah in the side lanes, by 15 minutes, even though the game is close, Mad is losing all the side lanes. So LeBlanc's pressuring Taliyah. In this case, it was up in top lane. Cassante at this point is nearly solo killing Jax in the bottom lane. And this is around 15, 60 minutes, so Rift Herald is about to spawn. MKOI is trying to take control of Rift Herald, and I'd say Alvaro has a bad engage here, where they just die trying to hold River, gives even more gold to Yunara, and that put G2 up a couple thousand gold. And from this point, they just did like really good G2 macro things. They held pressure for kind of the rest of the game. Since Mad couldn't win side lanes, they started trying these really risky and aggressive flank plays with either Jax or Alistair. But then the Bard vision and the mobility of LeBlanc kept catching them, so G2 never got appropriately flanked to lose. And they end up making pretty quick work of it. So 28-minute win for G2. They end up winning 58 to 48,000 gold, 20 kills to 7. And Hansama ended 8-1-6 with Labrov being 1-1-16. So they played a really solid game. So don't be too fearful if you're a G2 fan. I feel like they're online, and it will depend on the draws a bit for how they do in the rest of the tournament. All right, next game. This was TES versus Hundo Thundo. 100 Thieves had such a good game yesterday, and I love living in the past. That BLG win was great, because this TES loss was anything but. TES goes Sion, Kiana, Ryze, Yunara, Leona. 100 Thieves goes Ambessa, Vi, Taliyah, Kai'Sa, Rakan. And I didn't like this draft when I saw it. I thought the early Sion by TES and the first pick Yunara put them in good positions. I think picking Sion after River had picked Vi, I've seen a couple teams do this at Worlds this year, and I really love it, because once you're Vi, you're telegraphing a dive comp, and you very rarely will then have a team composition that is good at killing Sion. And since so many teams are taking Vi on 2, taking Sion on 3, unless the other team has this really insane top laner who can actually punish Sion, it's not going to be punished. So 100 Thieves tries to punish it a bit with Ambessa to just continue to all in on their dive comp. But then, I would say, since the Aurora is banned, which has been Quid's best champion, TES did a little bit more prep than BLG did yesterday by actually banning Aurora and Wukong. They end up picking Taliyah, which I don't love, because while it can still kind of work in dive comps, it doesn't put a huge amount of strength into Quid. And then I'd say the Alistair and Galio bans were just really on point by TES, because I think if they don't ban Galio, I think Ayla just picks the Alistair here. And then they probably still end up going with the Taliyah, but this is honestly a situation where, like, I wouldn't have even hated a Cassiopeia and just actually trying to play front to back with a little bit of dive, just because Cassio can be so good into Ryze and can also be pretty decent into Yunara and Kiana. But this is what 100 Thieves decided to go for, hoping they'd just be able to outplay. However, they could not. There was... Oh, really quick, I need to touch on this Poppy ban point, because what the hell? Why are LPL teams banning Poppy against 100 Thieves? 100 Thieves, throughout the year, banned Poppy themselves more than any other champion. River's career win rate on Poppy is 22%. The team didn't play Poppy all year. Potentially. And also, I know nobody was scrimming them. Golden Glue said none of the top teams were scrimming 100 Thieves. So it's not like they got some data that, wow, River's really cracked on Poppy. Maybe it's because it's an OP support pick in the LPL scrim bubble, and they thought maybe Ayla would be able to play it. But Poppy ban is still crazy to me against 100 Thieves. Anyway, TES stomped them, so it didn't matter. But something to track for the rest of 100 Thieves Worlds games, so people still keep banning Poppy against them, because I'm really confused. TES just had advantages in every lane, purely from laning. And after that, like, 100 Thieves needs to pull off these miracle fights, but that still doesn't work because TES is playing really aggressive. At the first Drake, there's a nice snap engage by Hong's Leona. It one-shots River. 100 Thieves fight back to get one kill, but it was literally 4v5 the whole time. They didn't get the Drake. It was only 1-for-1, and Sion gets placed top, and we already know that 100 Thieves doesn't have any answers for Sion. There's an even bigger disaster 14 minutes into this game. So Leona and Yunara catch Dokla's Ambessa in the bot lane, and at the same time, River tries to fight back in River. River's Vi in the River. He ults in. They don't have enough damage to finish off a kill. They just end up losing this fight 3-0. So, like, it's at that point, it's like 5,000 gold down. They're a dive comp into a good front line, and TES is a good team. They haven't mental boomed yet, if they're going to mental boom at Worlds. And this is a stomp. This game was honestly a stomp. Don't need to spend too much time on this. 100 Thieves, this is more what people expected from them going into Worlds. And this was more of like domestic TES. This wasn't international TES. They looked good. So they moved to 2-0, and good job to them. They won 26 minutes, 23 kills to 9. They ended up winning it with an 18,000 gold lead. And Cream's Rise ended the game 9-0-10. And the last note I have here is that this one was never close. Moving on to what I think was the most entertaining game of the day. Well, one of the most entertaining games of the day. I still feel like the GENG game was game of the day. Again, AL's games are popping off. I am having a hard time lining this up just right, but this is close enough for this next draft. Okay, so Smart by CFO. Get rid of Carrier's Bard right off the bat. Team comps end up being Sion, Kiana, Ryze, Draven, Alistair, versus T1's Rek'Sai, Vi, Cassio, Caitlyn, and Nico. And this is a pretty classic case of T1 just picking for the matchups. So there's a first pick Ryze by CFO. T1 locks in Caitlyn. They think, okay, we're going to get bot prio. They pick Vi because it's one of the strongest junglers on the patch. And again, as we've seen, bam, Sion on 3 of blue side. Love this. So many teams are doing this well. Caitlyn Vi goes into Kiana, so already strong front line. They lock in the Nico as well to guarantee the strong bot lane. And then they already know what top bot are from CFO, so they pick Rek'Sai because a lot of teams are picking Rek'Sai into Sion. Not 100% sure why. I need to talk to some top laners about why they see the value in this pick. And then Cassio into Ryze as a strong counter. So T1 is saying, like, we don't need to have the strongest 5v5. If we just win all 3 lanes, then we can take over the game with Owner's Vi. And quick shout out, even though Jarvan the 4th is 0-7, it's still getting banned against Owner because his Jarvan is so good. So I'm not 100% out on Jarvan, even though Jarvan lost the first 2 games today, wasn't picked again for the rest of the day. It's still getting banned in later games. So it's not completely dead as a pick. Okay, so diving into this T1 CFO game, CFO does feel confident against T1 because they went 5 games at MSI, and I think it showed in their play that they weren't afraid of anything T1 was doing. They had a strong early game plan. Junja's Kiana did an early invade onto Owner's Vi, and this whole sequence I thought was just really high level by both teams. There was really good warding from both teams in terms of warding out the counter jungling, warding out the reinvades, sending supports to help when you need to counter steal a buff. So like this whole sequence plays out. Kiana ended up like stealing the red and the Raptors away from Owner as Owner had to back away and then do a counter invade on the red buff side of the Kiana. It set Owner behind a little bit. I wouldn't say a huge amount because it set the Kiana behind a little bit as well. But it did definitely stop Owner from pulling off any fancy ganks, and all of the noise around these jungle invades definitely diminished T1's strong lanes where they were supposed to gain a big advantage early. So I thought that whole early game play by CFO really advantaged them to keep the game close. So it stayed an even game from this point. 60 minutes in before the Rift Herald. Overall, at this game state, I skipped a few points. Faker is fed on his Cassio. Doggo was fed on his Draven. He ended up getting this nice solo kill top lane onto Doran, which I think is 2/3 Doran being a really greedy inter, and 1/3 Doggo getting a nice stand aside on Doran as he was trying to tunnel away after like sticking around extra for like that one extra minion that he really didn't need to get. But this 16-minute fight at Rift Herald, CFO, they played incredibly well. They dodged engages on both sides of the fight. So there was a moment where Doran tries to go onto Doggo towards mid lane because this fight is happening in top river by the Rift Herald. Doran tries to go onto Draven. He missed his flash knockup. It's a little bit Doggo positioning well, a little bit of int by Doran, which is another one of those things where I feel like maybe he was first time in the pick. Not actually, but he just clearly didn't look comfortable to me. And then Owner also tried to snap engage onto Kiana, but Kiana had Grass Blade, went invisible, and then they were able to kill Owner afterwards. So because the Rek'Sai failed his engage, he's stuck behind CFO. Owner's Vi engage got stealthed. He gets killed immediately. And then CFO still have Rise ultimate. So they Rise ult in, get a 3 for 0, and get a pretty big lead. And from this point, they really try and speed up the game. Because I feel like they're a little bit worried about the Cassio Caitlyn scaling for good reason. Even though T1 has a win lane game, Caitlyn and Cassio scale really well. So they speed up the game, they rush Otacon, they get a good engage on a Faker. And at this point, I'm saying like T1 just needs more time. Because in this fight at the Otacon, Guma's Caitlyn could not do anything against the Alistar Scion frontline. It was just too strong. Not to mention, Draven had gone Bloodthirster Hexplate, huge 2-item spike, extremely durable, not going to be in threat at all from like a Nico Vi engage. So really, it's 24 minutes in, 46,000 to 42,000, 4,000 gold lead for CFO, 3 Drakes to 1. T1 really just need to stall. I still think they have a chance to win this game. They hold off a 26-minute Baron attempt by CFO. Good stall as well. But then, as T1 is going for the soul, Kiana flies in the back of the Dragon Pit, wins the steal after ulting Owner into the wall, bursts the Dragon. Kiana's insane at stealing Dragon. You do Rock Q, you press it, you smite. You're going to outburst Vi almost every single time, especially when you stun her into the wall. And then, to me, that kind of ended the game. T1 tried to fight right afterwards. They continually could not get on to Doggo's Draven. He was so fast when timing his W correctly, and with the Hexplate, whenever he'd ult, he'd get the bonus move speed and just zoom wherever he wanted. And they had the front to back. So like after that soul went over to CFO, it was a pretty swift win. They win the game at 32 minutes, 25 kills to 11. I think shocked a lot of people, shocked me. I really do feel like CFO, in terms of the LCP, is like 3 steps above the rest of the teams. I feel no fear if you're a NA team going up against TSW or PSG. I feel fear against this CFO team because every single one of their solo laners, as well as Doggo, Genji is world champion. Like, Driver had 2 solo kills, their top laner, on Scion yesterday. Honkyu's an insane mid laner. Like, they got players. Their macro's good. Their drafts are good. I don't know how they've reached this level, but I'm bought into CFO being a really strong team at this point. I'm willing to say that. Okay, spicy matchup of the day, GENG versus AL. AL had already taken down HLE yesterday. Now they must go up against GENG. Team comps on the side of GENG. We have Cassante, Xin, Ryze, Kai'Sa, Alistar. On the side of AL, we got Rek'Sai, Kiana, Talia, Corki, Poppy. Looking at this draft, early Poppy pick by AL. LPL loves Poppy. They love Kiana and they love Poppy. This support Poppy had huge value in this game. I look at the overall GENG team composition, looks really standard, pretty bruisery. They got Keen Sante in the 4-5. They got Kai'Sa, Alistar, Xin Zhao meta jungler. They first picked the Ryze after Ori and Cassio were banned away. So GENG is comfortable. Genji they didn't get the Galio this time. They decided for a slightly different team comp, but they are comfortable with this draft. And AL have a lot of walls, right? They got Kiana throwing people into walls. They got wall creation by Talia, and they got Poppy's ability to slam people into walls. Otherwise, I would say Gen G should have a scaling advantage. These are such more standard picks by Gen G than you have on the side of AL. Start of the game though, AL come out smoking. There was a interesting moment early on in the game where Chovy was just like pushing in a wave in the face of like 3 people. So this is a game where Genji initiated a lane swap top lane, Kai'Sa going into Rek'Sai, which is what we see a lot of teams doing into Rek'Sai already at World, since Rek'Sai's early laning into a ranged champ is abysmal. So I think we're going to see more teams do this to Rek'Sai if we continue to see Rek'Sai prio. But while that's happening, there's a Kiana, a Poppy, and a Talia all in mid lane. And Chovy's like trying to push the wave in. Tarzan's Kiana sees this and goes to try and kill Chovy. Chovy sidesteps the first water Q, the root Q, flashes away from the EQ rock Q, so basically avoids all of Kiana's damage. The turret ends up finishing off Kiana, and Chovy still dies. But I'm just thinking like, man, this guy is playing with a huge ego right now, because he dodged everything and still died. Even though he got a kill back. So it was still a positive kill for Chovy, but it was just thought it was an interesting Chovy moment. 7 minutes in, Ruler and Duro did a strange thing top lane. They had a level disadvantage, so Alistair was a level down onto Poppy, and Hope's Corki had a Sheen, whereas Ruler just had a longsword and a call. But they are the ones that start the 2v2. They lose it. Duro dies. And then in the extended play, as the junglers and the mid laners run up, Tarzan's Kiana also kills Canyon's Xin, which just gives AL a lot of momentum to try and carry through to the rest of the game. Makes them a little bit stronger. 18 minutes after AL already has 2 early Drakes from the early pressure they created through some of those fights in the mid gank. They use the Poppy ultimate to steal the Drake, but then they stick around and lose the extended fight. They were fighting without the Kiana ultimate. So this gave me massive deja vu to the game they had yesterday, because after this third Drake was secured by AL and Ruler chased after them on Kai'Sa to clean up the rest of the fight after Keen had like a massive Keen Sante Cassante fight, Ruler's 4-0-2. He's got a 2.2 thousand gold lead. So just think about yesterday, like Viper on HLE was what, like 7-0 on Kai'Sa with a 3,000 gold lead? So now it's the same situation. It's a super fed Kai'Sa and a gold lead versus Soul Point for AL. So AL is behind, but they're at a point where they make like one good play and they'll win the game. So really, really close game at this point. When Kai'Sa hits 3 items, Gen G just decide to rush Otacon. And I'm thinking at this point, like, holy crap, this is exactly where the game turned yesterday. HLE lost the Otacon fight. But this time, Gen G get it without any contest. AL's not able to find a good angle. They decide not to go in. So I snapshot the game here. 4,000 gold lead for Gen G, 42,500 to 38,500. 2.7 thousand of this is on Ruler's Kai'Sa. And the other 1.3K is on Keen's Cassante. So Kai'Sa Cassante are also like pretty good people to have your gold lead on. So I'm thinking they're in pretty good shape. But the soul fight is the moment. Couple of crazy things happen in this fight. So AL have a really nice Talia ultimate that bisects the river and actually completely cut off Ryze and Kai'Sa from the fight. And in a rare moment of poor coordination, Gen G engage. So Canyon and Duro both go in to all of AL while Ryze and Kai'Sa are stuck behind the Talia ultimate. So as that happens, Chovy, he tries to use his Talia, he tries to use his Realm Warp, his Ryze ultimate. And that's when Kyle's Poppy smacks them both because they're grouped up behind the wall. They're in this little corner. They're channeling. Bam, fly behind the pit. An extended 3v5. Because it is a pretty... Keen is a monster on Cassante too. It takes forever to kill this guy. So the fight just continues, right? The dragon continues to get low. Duro and and Chovy at this point are really trying to make sure that the soul doesn't go over to AL. So they root Tarzan's Kiana. Duro knocks him up. And here I'm thinking Ruler really wants to kill because Ruler's still behind the Dragon Pit. So he decides to send it with Kaisa ultimate, basically into everyone. He's trying to go through the team, get the execute onto Tarzan, and then in theory, clean up the fight, get the Drake, maybe move to Baron, win the game. But at the very edge, the Poppy W catches him, knocks him up, kills him, Ruler dies, and then the icing on the cake is Canyon loses the smite fight to Tarzan. So Soul as well as the shutdown to Kaisa, and that's it. That's basically the game, because at that point, once there's Soul, the Kiana is online, the Corki catches up in gold because they got the big shutdown onto Kaisa. I think Genji looked a bit tilted to me afterwards. So the gold leads down. They're versus Cloud Soul, so they don't have an easy way to get engages. The Elder fight is another really good Talia ultimate that just cuts off Genji. They can't contest the Elder. So AL gets the Elder, win the fight from there. They win the game at 32 minutes, 15 kills to 10. Kyle 1, 2, and 13 on Poppy. Probably the MVP. That's 14 of 15 kill participation, as well as some really clutch Poppy ultimates and steadfast presence. Shanks, honorable mention on Talia, 3, 1, and 10. And Flandre, I still don't understand these Rek'Sai picks, man. 0, 3, and 3 in a game where his team got 15 kills and won. Weird. But AL has now beaten HLE and Genji. Mind you, they've been down against a really fed Kaisa in both games. So I feel like if any of these are best of threes or best of fives, I still have no idea who the better team is. But in these best of one instances, the joy of Swiss, they're 2-0 and definitely have the strongest strength of schedule of anyone in the tournament. The number 1 and 2 seeds from Korea, who has been dominating internationally for the last 2 years. So AL absolutely doing all of the LPL a huge solid so far in the Swiss stage. This was game of the day. Once again, AL showing up. All right, BLG Fnatic. LEC fans are not happy. BLG's team comp, Renekton, Nefiri, Orianna, Zyra Khan. Fnatic's team comp, Poppy, Vi, Aurora, Caitlyn, Morg. So here's the valid criticism of the Fnatic draft. They pick Aurora Vi, which says dive. Orianna first pick, not too surprising. A lot of the top mid laners are doing that. Zyra Khan as an answer to Aurora Vi because they don't want to get dove on. But if you're going to play a dive comp, like, you can't really pivot Aurora Vi to a long-range team fighting comp. Like, once you Aurora Vi, you're not really allowed to pivot, in my opinion. But they see the Zyra Khan, and to me clearly say, I'd imagine Upset has a really big voice, maybe Mickey as well, in the comms, and say, okay, we can fuck this lane. Like, we can destroy them with Caitlyn Morgana. So they lock in the Caitlyn and the Morgana. And I think they just decide that they're going to try and win against Zyra Khan. I think if I want to do this draft again, like, even though Kai'Sa's not an amazing laner against Xayah, Kai'Sa works so well again with Aurora Vi, and you can just continue to full send your dive comp. You're also not against a Sion because it didn't get picked immediately. You can ban the Sion in the 4-5. You could even pick it yourself to have a brick in the top lane. Fnatic does none of those things. They end with Morg. I also heard some conversation about flexing the Poppy top to try and mess up the Renekton. That's pretty bold against Bin Renekton. Like, yes, technically Oscar played one Aurora game all year and was able to win with it, but I think that's a pretty tall task. So I understand the Poppy, especially once they see Nefiri, Renekton, and Rakan as all dash champions that they want to be able to stop. So defensible Poppy, but the composition for Fnatic just doesn't have a lot of synergy. But also, like, they're not really expected to win this game. It just ended up being extremely disappointing because the way this game starts, after kneecapping their team composition to fit the Caitlyn Morgana, they try really hard to get a kill at level 1, narrowly miss it, burn both of their flashes, don't have wards, and Shadows Nefiri does red Krugs gank and gets 2 kills right at the start of the game. And the pain in Vedius's voice after this happened on the cast, where he just says, "Oh my goodness," in like a half excited but clearly painful way. He knows that the whole point of this team composition felt like it went out the window at the very start of the game. For what it's worth, in-game, my opinion, Fnatic kind of gets it back later. It becomes a bot lane fiesta where everyone ganks back and forth, but Razark hits level 6 first on Vi. They end up getting the shutdown onto Elk, and at 7 minutes, they've at least equalized the gold bottom lane. That's not ideal. You want to be like 500 to 1,000 gold up with multiple plates taken if you're going to pick Caitlyn Morgana, but at least it's equalized. Then going through the rest of this game, Rift Herald fight at 15:30. Upset continues to play pretty aggressive. They get a kill onto Elk Xayah, but while all the bot lane stuff was happening, Bin was taking plates and getting a big CS lead onto Oscar and its Poppy. So Bin entered this fight at 15:30, and him and Shadow just clean up Fnatic 3-for-1. It makes it a 4K gold lead, 2 Drakes, and a Rift Herald. Feats are over to BLG, and LS had a tweet at this point in the game that I wanted to call out. It's pretty spot on. So 24 minutes and 36 seconds into the game, this is what his tweet says. 3 of Fnatic members are about to finish major items. Drake was just taken by Fnatic, which is true, giving them 5 more minutes of scaling, and for some reason they decide the time is now. So basically he's saying it was just a really bad timing for a fight because they have a big disadvantage, and if you're really playing Caitlyn, you need to wait for the Caitlyn to scale up. Right at this point, Knight and Bin both have level advantages. There's a big gold lead. There's no items. I think Fnatic went in because they thought it was a 4v5. Bin was top lane on the Renekton, but this fight wasn't even close. They lose it pretty badly. That leads to Baron and a 10,000 gold lead for BLG, which effectively ends the game. The game ends during the Baron power play, 27 minutes, 42 seconds. Shadow, who subbed in for Beishuan, also played 42 games in summer to Beishuan's 12. I want to see him for the rest of Worlds. He's looking like a better fit with BLG right now. 616 on a Fury, but Bin was the star of the game. 4.6 thousand gold lead on the Renekton by the end of it. And on his Rakan, 100% kill participation. 0-1-14 on Rakan. So last game of the day was HLE PSG. I won't spend too much time on this one because it was potentially, to me, technically the game was close. It just never felt close to me. So team compositions, PSG, Ambessa, Vi, Aurora, Ezreal, Bard. HLE's team comp is Ambessa, Vi, Aurora, Ezreal, Bard. And PSG's comp is Yorick, Nefiri, Talia, Caitlyn, Karma. Big dive comp energy from HLE. And a really weird draft to me from PSG because you have this huge dive comp and you have nobody to absorb the dive. They have no front line. They're basically just hoping to split push. They have no real engage. They have a Talia wall and a little Yorick cage and like a Caitlyn trap and a Caitlyn and a Karma slow. This comp sucks. Like, I just hate this. This is the worst draft I've seen of the day. G2's draft was pretty bad yesterday. It just, the matchup of this draft made me think if this game is at all close, HLE is just going to be able to walk through them. So, yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail about this game. It was close in gold. HLE did look a little sloppy. There was one fight where Zeka's Aurora used all his spells onto Nefiri. Nefiri dodged everything. Karsa, shout out to Karsa. 10 international appearances, 28 years old, him and Maple. I love the graphic they showed at the start of this game, actually. Karsa, Maple, Betty trying to do the run back tour with Flash Wolves. International appearances for Karsa, Maple, Betty are 10, 14, and 7. Karsa and Maple are both 28, Betty's 24. Like, they're just trying to have a good time, for old time's sake. This game was not a good time. If there's one moment in this game you should check out, it should be the third dragon fight. It just shows exactly why these compositions aren't close. The game is close in gold, but the engage is just so easy. They just fly in with Ambessa and Vi whenever they want. Nobody on PSG could actually absorb the engage, so the person they press the button on dies. And then they will have more people, so they continue to press the buttons on them and kill them. Zeka builds a Medjay's after that third Drake fight. He ends the game with a 25-stack Medjay's. The game ends at 28 minutes. 16 kills to 6. I think a very stress-free game for them. Okay, that's all the games. Now I want to talk a little bit about what we've seen so far. So these are, they're not all on the screen at the same time, but these are the Swiss results so far and the matchups that we have coming up. I think it's really interesting. After 2 days, we're trying to make these large statements about the strength of regions and the strength of teams, but every team has only played 2 best of ones against wildly different strength of opposition. So what I did is using this, I broke down the regions, who they've beaten and who they've lost to. Okay? So LPL, clear winners so far because they've beaten HLE and GENG. AL did that. Then they've also beaten every Western team aside from 100 Thieves they've played against, but they've beaten G2, they've beaten Fnatic, and then TES beat 100 Thieves today with the only LPL loss, all world so far, being the upset with BLG beating, or 100 Thieves beating BLG. LCK has had it much worse. So they've beaten MAD, Team Secret Whales, PSG twice, and FlyQuest. LCK does not have impressive wins yet at all in Swiss stage. And they've lost to AL twice in CFO. So the fact that they've only lost to 2 different teams, fine. But they actually haven't had that impressive win yet, and they haven't had to play each other, which is going to change. LEC looks pretty rough for them, but they've been losing to some pretty heavy hitters. So LEC has lost to Top, to CFO, who also beat T1, to BLG, who, yes, they lost to 100 Thieves, but come on, man. They are the number 1 seed from the LPL. They're not a joke. KT, and then they team killed each other. G2 beat MKOI. And their only win is against themselves with KOI. So they're 1-5, but that is pretty hard teams that they've played so far. LCS has beaten BLG in the upset, and they beat Vivo Cade Stars today. They've lost to TES and T1. Unexpected win BLG, everything else expected. And then the LCP, even though there's a massive difference to me between CFO and the rest of them, look pretty balanced in the fact that they've beaten T1, Fnatic, and Vivo Cade Stars, and they've lost to KT, GENG, and HLE. So I feel like that gives a more balanced read of what's happened so far. So like, yes, LEC has the worst record, but they've had the hardest teams. So I want to see how that equalizes as it moves on, because like I've written down after 16 games, there have been like 3 upsets. One big upset with 100 Thieves beating BLG, and then 2 small upsets with AL beating HLE and GENG in what were very close games. HLE and GENG, these games were almost mirrors of each other. Fed Kaisa, gold lead against Soul Point. Neither one of them could clutch up and finish it. So AL is hitting at 2-0. CFO versus T1, another upset. And then if you're really pulling hairs, you could say TES versus G2 was a flip, but I consider TES, unless they're choking, a better team than G2. So I'd say there's like 1 big upset, 2 medium upsets. Sorry, 2 like minor upsets with AL beating the LCK teams. 1 medium upset with CFO beating T1. And that's it. And then I see the other 12 games I feel like went to expectations. So really interesting first 2 days of Swiss, but that's where things stand now. Looking forward as well to what the draw gave us. CFO versus AL and KT versus TES. Winners of these, this gets played tomorrow. Go through as 3-0. Always a blessing and a curse to 3-0 because technically you move it through to quarterfinals after 3 days, but then you sit on your hands for like 10 days. And it's really hard to keep that level going into the best of 5 phase. And also, since none of these teams came in as tournament favorites, it's not like it's going to be a 3-0 GENG sitting there or a 3-0 BLG sitting there. So I would expect AL to win that one against CFO, but CFO has looked really strong. And then KT versus TES is going to be an absolute banger. KT has looked shaky, but they've been, to me, drafting against inferior opponents to have the smallest chance of defeat rather than the highest chance of a resounding victory. But TES has definitely looked more solid to me. The 1-1 pool, going to be a bit of a bloodbath. G2 BLG, The silver lining here is BLG can't eliminate G2. They can only move them to 1-2. GENG versus T1. This is the saddest thing. Like, it's great for chaos, but these are two of the best teams in the tournament, man. T1 scale throughout the tournament. GENG, I think, is the best team in the world. I think GENG will beat T1, knock them to 1-2, which is going to create, it's going to test T1's plot armor even more. TSW versus FlyQuest. LCS, FlyQuest gets the draw once again. Likely, if FlyQuest play to their level, they can be 2-1 and be in a very similar situation to where they were last year. Because I look back to last year, they had 2 easy wins in the first 3. Then they lost a best of 3 to HLE, which was a close competitive game, and they advanced at the very end with a best of 3 against Team Liquid. So because of this draw to this stage, there's actually a relatively high chance that FlyQuest can advance again without having to beat an LPL or LCK team, which to the critics will make it fraudulent, but it'll still count if they make it to Swiss stage. So, a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see FlyQuest against G2. I think that would have been the nicest one for me to see. I don't want to see them against HLE, BOG, T1, or GENG. So an amazing draw for FlyQuest. And then Hunter Thieves get HLE. Unlucky. Someone's got to do it. And then as we move to the 0-2 teams, VKS versus PSG and another team kill between MKOI and Fnatic, guaranteeing that one of them will go 0-3 and tie for last place in the Swiss stage. So I do want to shout out a Reddit comment that I saw here as well, since a lot of people were talking about this being a really bad draw. I'll try and read through this a little bit slowly, but essentially the main complaint is that oh wow, this 1-1 bracket is such an incredible bloodbath. Look at all these quality teams. This is kind of just the nature of Swiss. So this Reddit comment says, in 2023, the 1-1 group had T1, Weibo, BLG, and KT as the strongest teams. All 4 of those teams ended up making it out of Swiss. 2024, the 1-1 group had TES, T1, BLG, and Weibo as the strongest teams. All of them made it out of Swiss. And both world finalists were there. This is true in both 2023 and 2024. So both world finalists came out of the 1-1 group of Swiss in the past 2 years. This year, the 1-1 group is T1, GENG, HLE, and BLG as the strongest teams, which I agree with. I'd say G2, TSW, FlyQuest, and Hunter Thieves are very clearly the 4 weaker teams. So part of it is GENG, T1 are matching up against each other. So there's a chance that we get a really weird breakdown and somehow T1 loses, they win the 2-2 game. But later on, GENG plays BLG in the 2-1 matchup and that knocks one of them down. And then we have to have BLG versus T1. But there's a real chance that all 4 of those teams still make it through. And it's just part of the chaos of Swiss. But that's all I have. Thanks for watching. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the video. Still over half of the viewers aren't subscribed. However, the subscribers do watch longer on average. So the fact that I'm 58 minutes in complaining about subscribers not you guys are making it through the whole thing. So thanks for watching. I will see you tomorrow after the CFO, AL, and KT TES games to break it all down once again. Bye.